While leaving for work, office worker Kobayashi gets approached by a dragon named Toru. The dragon transforms into a maid with a tail and tells Kobayashi that they met in the mountains when Kobayashi stumbled onto her. Kobayashi then recalls being drunk the day before and coming across a wounded dragon in the mountains. Instead of feeling fear, the drunk Kobayashi just asked Toru to come live with her. However, Kobayashi is not ready for the responsibility of housing a dragon, so she sends Toru away at first, but she later reconsiders because she feels guilty. Toru happily moves in as Kobayashi's inexperienced maid, and despite many setbacks, Toru proves useful when she prevents burglars from breaking into Kobayashi's house. One day, she follows Kobayashi to work and meets Kobayashi's work friend, Makoto, who makes her jealous, but she soon discovers that Makoto is just an ordinary otaku friend. She accepts Makoto and tries to dry laundry the next day by clearing the sky with her fire, unaware that it would attract a tiny dragon nearby. Later, Kobayashi goes shopping with Toru to prepare meals. She realizes that even though Toru hates humans, she is actually friendly with everybody at the marketplace. Toru stops a mugging, and everybody gathers around to praise her. Back home, Kobayashi is still surprised by her maid dragon when a new visitor, Kana, visits their apartment. Their visitor is also a dragon like Toru, who got kicked out of her world for pulling pranks. Toru explains that Kana is a child dragon and asks Kobayashi to let her stay at her apartment with her. Kobayashi agrees, and she teaches Kana and Toru how to have fun at a human level because their idea of fun is extreme. She goes to work the next day, and Toru explains to Kana that she wants to do the best she can to help Kobayashi for what she's done for her. After living with two dragons for a while, Kobayashi realizes her apartment is getting cramped, so she decides to look for a new place to stay with them. They look for apartments together until they find one with a community roof. The dragons like the extra space on the roof, and Kobayashi is glad to have separate rooms, so she buys them. She puts Kana and Toru in a separate room with a larger bed while she takes the other room for herself. However, things become difficult in their new apartment because the neighbors make a lot of noise, which bothers Kobayashi. To solve the problem, Toru goes around asking the neighbors to keep it down, and while they initially agree, they later start to have disagreements among themselves. Later, Toru decides to throw a party at their new apartment and invites her dragon friends. Fafner and Luko get introduced to Kobayashi, who also invited Makoto to the party. Fafner appears cynical and evil, whereas Luko is endowed and cheeky. They all get along and begin to bond with one another. Some days later, Kobayashi notices Kana staring at school kids on their way to school, so she asks Kana if she would like to go to school, to which she answers yes. So, to prepare, Toru, Kobayashi, and Kana go shopping for school stationeries and everything Kana would need. They get them all, and Kana is overjoyed to be starting school. The next day, she introduces herself to the new class, and everybody gets attracted to her because of her appearance and skills. They all admire Kana and her abilities because she appears cool. Another student, Sayakawa, challenges her, but Kana simply pretends to cry and persuades Sayakawa to be her friend. A few days later, Sayakawa challenges a few older children to a game of dodgeball, and she enlists the aid of Kana's dragon friends. The dragons were eager to assist, and they defeated the older kids in dodgeball before engaging in their own epic battle. Days later, Toru is glad that she hasn't been getting any complaints from Kobayashi lately, so she decides to go watch Kobayashi at work. She uses her magic to hide and discovers that Kobayashi is a hard-working engineer. Makoto was also present by Kobayashi's desk, which irritated Toru, but she was glad that Kobayashi had Makoto to rely on at work. She then watches as Kobayashi gets scolded by her boss and decides to teach the man a lesson by embarrassing him. Later, Toru helps Fafner get a place to stay, and she eventually settles on having Fafner share an apartment with Makoto. Surprisingly, Makoto and Fafner get along very well because of their love for video games, so they accommodate each other at Makoto's place. Weeks later, Sayakawa and Kana's friendship is in full bloom, so Sayakawa invites Kana to her home to meet her maid sister, Georgie. Kana brings Toru and Kobayashi along, and Kobayashi has a great deal of fun with Georgie because Georgie shares her love for cosplay maids. Meanwhile, Sayakawa becomes flustered in her room with Kana when they play multiple games that make her happy. She appears very attracted to Kana and desires more from their friendship at that age, but Kana is unaware of Sayakawa's fetishes. Later, Luko returns to the Kobayashis and explains that she has become acquainted with a young mage named Shota and will now live in this world. She takes them to Shota's house to help convince him that Luko is not a demon, but nothing they do works because Shota is adamant that Luko is a demon. Meanwhile, Fafner and Makoto become increasingly close through video games and programming, and Fafner gradually sheds his cynical and evil side. Later, Kobayashi and the Dragon Girls go to the beach with Shota and Sayakawa in tow. They have maximum fun while Luko keeps getting sent out of the beach because of her inappropriate clothing. Kobayashi and Toru also get into a deep conversation about Kobayashi's parents and how she grew up, which makes Toru very happy to be by Kobayashi's side. At the beach, Kobayashi announces to the girls that they will be helping Makoto with selling his newly developed game at Comiket. Toru is delighted to assist, but she is taken aback by the sheer number of people who flocked to Comiket and how well organized they were. While there, Toru notices that some of the cosplayers are not cosplayers but rather monsters from her world in their natural form. So Kobayashi nudges Toru to approach them, and she discovers that they are all taking time to breathe in their true form because no one would fear them since they resemble cosplayers. They introduced their races and were very surprised and frightened to learn that Toru was a dragon. They flee from her in fear, and then Toru decides to try what they did by revealing her wings and her tail. The photographers around her are amazed by her cosplay outfit, so they all start asking for pictures, which results in Toru spending the rest of Comiket being a model. The next day, Kobayashi and Toru challenge each other to a cookout to determine who will prepare a lunchbox for Kana's field trip, so they invite their dragon friends to be the judge. Kobayashi eventually emerges the winner because Toru doesn't understand the concept of a lunchbox and what can actually fit in it. By night, they get a new dragon visitor, Elma, who claims she was there to drag Toru back to their world. Kana explains that Kana and Elma are longtime rivals with the same power and that a battle between them could level multiple islands. To get rid of Elma, Toru tricks her into agreeing to a fight in another dimension, only to abandon her on a field. Elma, on the other hand, keeps returning to the house because she does not appear to have enough power to return to her world. She came through the same gate that Toru did. To fend for herself, she starts working at Kobayashi's company, and Toru gets really jealous after learning that Elma and Kobayashi will be working together from now on. The next week, Kana tells Kobayashi about her upcoming sports festival at school but gets sad when she learns that Kobayashi won't be able to attend because she has work. Kobayashi then notices that Kana is getting sad, so she decides to work as hard as she can to clear her schedule before the sports festival arrives. Meanwhile, Kana and her classmates put in a lot of training at school to win at the sports festival, and Toru is proud to see Kana go. Later, the sports festival arrives, and Kobayashi is in attendance, bringing joy to Kana, who decides to work as hard as she can to win. They put in a lot of effort at all the games, and Kana's class came out on top at the end of the festival. As Christmas approaches, Kobayashi gets asked to put on a play for the elderly in the shopping district. To do this, she calls all her friends, and they put together a play of The Little Match Girl with Kana as the lead role. They put together the acts, but the dragons think the play is mediocre, so they decide to brighten it up by incorporating demon lords and magical girls. They put everything they had into it, and the result was an exhilarating play that wowed their audience. Later, Toru and Kobayashi go for a ride together, reminiscing about their time together and exchanging Christmas presents. Some days later, the end of the year approaches, and Kobayashi finally gets time off work, so they decide to spend most of their time relaxing at home while watching TV. They get visited by their neighbors, who come bearing gifts and pleasantries. So, Toru decides that they get out of the house and have fun before the new year. They finally leave the house wearing kimonos and meet Elma and the others at the New Year's Eve celebration, where they all express how happy they are to be together here. They celebrate the new year together and then decide to stay under a kotatsu they won in a lottery. When Kobayashi's parents call to greet her the next day, Toru decides to ask her what it's like to have a human family. And Kobayashi responds that it's both bliss and torture. Days pass and Kobayashi and Kana return to their regular work and school lives, while Toru decides to prepare an omurice dish for the family before they get home. She enlists the assistance of Luko, who arrives at the apartment dressed normally. Toru inquires about the sudden change, and Luko explains that she eventually caved into people's complaints about her revealing clothing. Luko advises Toru to use the right ingredients for the omurice, so Toru goes out shopping, only to discover that she needs ingredients from her world to make it work. She takes a quick stop in her world and prepares an outrageous dish of omurice for Kobayashi. Meanwhile, Kobayashi recalls meeting Toru as a dragon and assisting her in pulling a sword from her body. Toru was aggressive at first, but after transforming, she thanked Kobayashi for her assistance and shared a drink with her. They talk about how alone they were in the world, and Kobayashi asks Toru if she would like to come live with her. Later, Toru starts dealing with doubt within herself because she knows that her stay with Kobayashi might not be permanent. She broods over all the possibilities that could make her return home, but still affirms that she would like to remain with Kobayashi but doesn't want to see her death. While brooding over this, a new dragon entered the sky to greet Toru, and he appeared to be her father, the Emperor of Demise, who had come to take her home. Kana notices his presence and attempts to prevent Toru from returning home, but she arrives late and informs Kobayashi of Toru's situation. She explains that Toru may never be able to return, and while Kobayashi appeared unfazed, she was actually disturbed and sad about Toru's absence. However, this doesn't last long because Toru returns to Kobayashi's world without permission from her father. They meet again at Kobayashi's door, but Toru's father interrupts and threatens Kobayashi, claiming that dragons are not supposed to interfere in their world. However, Kobayashi confronts him, stating that she has grown very close to Toru and is unconcerned about any of the consequences her father imposes. Toru is overjoyed, so she decides to settle her differences with her father in the dragon world by fighting him. However, Kobayashi and Kana arrive to stop them, and she eventually persuades Toru's father to allow Toru to remain in her world. What are your thoughts? Will Toru and Kobayashi be able to coexist peacefully in this world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and smash that subscribe button. See you at the next one. Adios.